Welcome back to the Community Action Podcast. If this is your first time joining, my name is Jamie Carney, and with me today is Gail Lombardi and Jesse Quintana. We are family coaches and facilitators for the Future Story Initiative. The Future Story Initiative is a place where community members can receive information, gain skills, and receive support while they're working on exiting poverty. Today we're going to have a conversation about personal leadership. But if you haven't seen our other podcasts, go ahead and check them out. What is leadership?
Well, I think it's the ability to guide people. It can be the people you directly influence people, and then there's your own personal life. But when I look at a leader, I think guiding and influencing and maybe mentoring.
Yeah, I think so. What kind of leaders have you had in your life?
I've had them across the board where they've really influenced me. They've been my mentors, and there's some that have actually been discouraging. So then I think that's where my personal leadership came in. But it wherever you work depends on what kind of leadership is there. Jesse?
Yeah. I think I've had, coaches for leaders, some teachers, even people on social media.
Right.
I've had people on different YouTube and stuff like that have been leaders in my life to a certain degree,
When I think back to a leader in my life, one of the first leaders that made an impact, I think, was a coach. And that coach was there to not only to teach us, but support us and encourage us to continue to keep going. And so that's where the big impact for me was. I can also think of a boss, and I think it was the same kind of things that were coming out with that leaders, that teaching and guiding and encouraging and making it fun. Even though you were working, it was still fun.
Right, and they empowered you so that you started believing in yourself. Maybe even if you didn't do it the first time, it's children, and as you want to do it perfect, and they empowered you to say, "No, that's okay. That's a mistake is fine." And so good leadership is a quality that is very important in all of our lives. I like the leadership at Community Action for that reason. Is they encourage us to empower the community, but they empower us and they come alongside. And we have Community Action has great leadership in all aspects. We're lucky.
I can say, I think you had a couple key words in there, and you had said good leadership. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about that because there's all kinds of different leaders, right?
Right.
You can have good leaders. You can have good leaders that are good. Then you can have good leaders that lead you in not so great of a way, right?
Right. Because
I've had great leaders in my life who necessarily didn't lead me down the right path,
Oh, that's a good point.
I would say a lot of my growing up, especially my growing up years, I didn't really have parents or anything like that. So I didn't have anybody that really gave me that guidance. Typically your first leader, I would say, in your life is probably your parents,
right.
Mm-hmm. They teach you right and wrong, all the morals and the good stuff like that. But then there's also peers and things like that. So for me, I had a lot of leaders in my life, and I would say that I wasn't a leader in my own life. You know what I mean? I was easily led by other people. And a person can be a good leader, and it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're leading you is in the right direction.
That's very good.
It's
very good.
And I also know from personal experience that I've probably not been such a great leader in my own life for other people at certain times.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, things have changed now, but I can remember times where I've led people probably down the wrong path. You know what I mean? So I think it's important. If we're talking about leadership, not only are we talking about leaders that are leading you in a positive direction, but also leaders that are leading you in maybe a negative direction.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
That's a good point.
Oh, there's great leaders that we think of great leaders all the time. Like people throw off names of great leaders,
Yeah.
Oh, Abraham Lincoln or John
Yeah.
F. Kennedy or
Right.
whoever the leaders are. And then there's always not so great leaders as well, like Adolf Hitler, right? I mean, he led
That's good points.
many, many people to do many, many bad things.
Intelligent people to do very, very bad
But he was
things.
a great
Because
leader.
he was a great leader. Yeah.
If we're talking about leadership, it's like it also doesn't have to be like this grand thing. It doesn't have to be like, I mentioned some names of some great leaders that I've remembered. However, there's lots of leaders out there that have done tiny little things in my life that have shown me, holding the door open for somebody, opening a car door for a woman, things like that. You know what I mean? Those are small things. However, they're just as impactful as the big things,
You remember those, right? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You remember those, And then, what am I doing in my own life? If I'm looking at leadership, what am I doing to be a leader for my children, to be a leader for other people around me, but also how am I leading myself? Am I leading myself?
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
Am I
good.
really leading myself?
Are you being influenced?
Or am I being influenced by social media, by my peers, by my coworkers?
To be accepted. So I'll just, yeah.
Am I truly leading myself to where I want to be?
See, I like what you said earlier about good leaders can lead you in a bad way. So that's why it's really important for individuals and as parents that we develop a personal leadership. So we're aware. Am I doing this or am I being influenced? That personal leadership is really important. And I'm going to throw this in just because I like it. That goes back to the emotional intelligence. What's going on? Is this a good for me? This good for my family? So personal leadership, I think, is another strong point for success.
That's more internal than external, though, right?
Right.
So that's more of what's coming from inside rather than what's being influenced from outside.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So to identify our leadership, we talk about in Future Story, we talk about the SWOT.
Right. Taking a personal inventory of
What's going on?
What's going on inside, your qualities inside, as well as external things that are going on. These are all things that lead us down different paths,
Yeah.
So the SWOT analysis is oftentimes used for businesses to identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a great way to be able to identify places that you're doing something good in, as well as places that you can improve in. And I think that's a great tool for individuals to use as well as businesses, so you can identify those things that are going well and to make changes in.
I agree, because sometimes we think if we identify our strengths, then we can succeed. But if we're not identifying our weaknesses and addressing those also, then we can get...
Well, it seems like it's really easy to identify our weaknesses, though, right?
Oh, it's so much easier to address those.
If somebody asks you, hey, I want you to write down a list on this side of your strengths and a list on this side of your weaknesses, you're going to come back with a lopsided page.
Well, you're going to watch them, and they're going to fill out the weaknesses really fast. And then, wait, we want both strengths and weaknesses. And all of a sudden, they have to look at their friend to have a
It
weakness.
just
it's
seems
really,
easier to look at the
it's
weaknesses.
hard to develop those strengths. Well, to acknowledge them.
Right.
But I think it's a good place to start and work on your plan and work on developing that personal leadership and to be able to do that self-inventory, but also identify the good and the bad and the threats. Because to identify an opportunity or a threat would be a way to be able to make a change to where you're going, to where you want to be. And in our last video, we talked about poverty and getting through that financial gap. Some of those things that we're identifying in ourselves could help us make that change to get out of the situation we are in and get to where we want to be.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah. Because we can have an opportunity that that we like and we identify. But if we don't identify the threat, maybe it's a family member or somebody that's leading us, saying, "Oh no, it's always been this way," or "No, you can't do that," or boom. You need to identify all of them, all in one shot. You can't just pull out one and do one or the other. It has to be all together.
So explain to me just a little bit more about how that would work. If I wanted to sit down and do a SWOT analysis and I wanted to do a personal inventory of, my strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, how would I go about doing that? What would that look like?
Well, it's pretty basic. It would be easily on a piece of paper or a chalkboard or a whiteboard, wherever you want to do it. And you would make 4 columns. At the top of that column, that first column, you would write down an S, and that's going to be the column where you list down all of your strengths. That next column, you would have at the top a W, and that's where you would list down all of your weaknesses. On the next column would be at the top your O, which where you would list all your opportunities, and then that last final column would be a T, where you could list down all of your threats.
Okay, so the strengths and weaknesses are more of your personal, internal strengths and weaknesses that you have, whereas your opportunities and threats are more of
External.
outside of your external type of things.
Out of your control, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so by taking a good look at the paper you don't just wrote down, you can see if you have some weaknesses or threats or even opportunities. Those can be potential places where you would want to make changes or get education or maybe grow to be able to better yourself. It's just really a personal inventory of where you're at to be able to guide you and set up a plan of where you want to be.
Such as if you have an opportunity and you have a threat, then if this threat, let's look at my weaknesses and how is that going to affect me? And then take the strengths and say, okay, I'm going to avoid these people, or I'm going to avoid this spot, or I'm not going to listen to my friends saying, no, I can't do that. I take that strength that you believe in yourself. And it's really very simple, very basic, but very, very effective in success.
Yeah. It's really about kind of brainstorming and that development of the plan of making change.
Okay, this is where I'm going to do a plug for community action. That's what we do well, is when somebody comes in and they can't see their strength or their weaknesses. Let's just give them honest feedback, because you got to do those weaknesses also. And let's discuss with them what they're going to do so that they can look at it, take it inside and say, oh.
I think that's a great point, Gail, because a lot of times it is hard to identify your own maybe strengths.
Absolutely.
And so if you can connect with somebody that knows you well, they may be able to identify those strengths a little bit easier for you and help you make that list if that's what you need to do.
And sometimes I think, like, if you were going to write, because I can think of a few of my own, if you're going to write strengths and weaknesses down, where I may have the same thing on both sides, or it may be a strength, but it also may be a weakness of mine.
Absolutely.
And finding that balance to kind of weigh it over to the strength side and less on the weakness side.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to do when you think outside the box yourself, and to be able to like formulate a way to do that. And sometimes it helps having somebody else to talk it through and kind of figure out, like, how do I turn this weakness into just a strength and not a strength and a weakness?
I like that. That's good.
If you've stuck with us till now, you've heard us talk about leadership and taking personal inventory. If you want some help doing that, us here at Community Action as family coaches can work on that. If you also want more information on this, please reach out to us for the Future Story Initiative. We have essential skills workshops that you can attend and sign up for. And so again, thanks for joining us. See you on our next video.
Thank you for joining us today. Community Action Partnership is a nonprofit organization. All the services we provide are free of charge to income qualifying community members. What we talked about today is just a bit of what we cover in our coaching and workshops. For more information, you can check out our website at capforaction.org. That's CAP4 action.org. You could also just give us a call at 1-800-326-4843,
or come visit one of our locations. We would like to thank our sponsor, Optum Idaho, for making this series possible.